Welcome to the show, everyone. You are watching NBTV, and this is our weekly Crypto Beat live show where we dive into all things privacy and crypto. And we always have some wonderful guests. This week, I'm super excited to welcome to the show for the first time. We have Wendy O. If you guys are not subscribed to her channel, you absolutely need to be. So we're going to dive into some of the latest crypto stories with her. And then we've also got Lorne Lantz. He's the CEO of Breadcrumbs, which is an open blockchain analytics platform. We're going to dive into some juicy content as well there. But let's go over all the topics right off the bat that we're going to be covering. We're starting with inflation. Crazy numbers that came out this week, 7.5%. And so Wendy's going to dive into what that means for the crypto space. Also looking at price charts. I don't usually do that on my show, but with inflation going so crazy, it's interesting from a macro sense to be talking about where is crypto going now. So we're going to dive into that. Then we're going to talk about Hungary, which wants the EU to ban crypto. We'll see how successful they are with that little initiative. Diving in with Lorne Chain Analytics. Giant story from this week. The couple that apparently laundered billions of dollars from the Bitfinex hack in 2016, they were arrested, and all of these charts were released showing how the government basically traced all of the funds. I thought it was would be interesting to dive into all those details. So we have an expert, Lorne, on the show to talk about that. And then it's privacy time, our weekly segment called Get Off My Digital Lawn. And we're diving into the CIA's bulk surveillance program that was just revealed this week. Wow, like huge news. And then we've got the Earn It bill, which is an initiative to ban end-to-end encryption. So meaty stuff to dive into this week. Let's just dive straight into it. So Wendy, right off the bat, inflation numbers. I'm just going to throw some numbers at our audience so they get an idea of what we're dealing with here. So CPI, Consumer Price Index, was just released, and inflation has soared to a 40-year high. 7.5% in the last year. These price increases were across the entire economy. So wages have risen the fastest pace in 20 years. Electricity has skyrocketed 4.2% just this month, but up 10% over the year. You got furniture and supplies. So the largest 1 month increase on record since 1967. Used car prices up 41% from a year ago. Just a mind-blowing figure there. And this is basically what happens when you quadruple the money supply in the space of a year. So I'm going to throw this over to you, Wendy, for all this. You see all the memes across crypto Twitter, like the money printing memes. And like, what does this mean for people? I mean, do you think this is going away anytime soon? What are your thoughts on the whole thing?
Naomi, inflation is transitory. It is transitory, okay? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Inflation is not transitory. Do not listen to any of these ivory tower people when they say inflation is transitory. It's not transitory. What they're trying to do, and if you don't know what transitory is, that's okay. Basically, it means something that is temporary. It's a fancy way of saying that because they don't like to use plain English. They want to make sure that whatever they're pushing out, you're not able to understand, because that is how they keep us stagnant. So when we're talking about inflation hitting 7.5%, when I was working in healthcare, I would get a COLA increase. COLA means cost of living increase. That was 0.0, or that was 1% or 3% per year. So generally companies will give you, in the United States, they will give you, depending on who you work for. In healthcare, they don't really care about you, which is terrible. That's another topic. But they'll give you 1 to 3% raise increase. So if inflation is sitting at 7.5% and you're given a 1% to 3% cost of living increase, it doesn't equate. The math does not check out because you're still not making enough to be able to pay for basic things, for groceries, for your electricity, for your bills. And if you live in a place like Southern California, like I do myself, it's very hard to live out here. So the fact that we have these high inflation rates is immensely scary because they're not going to be going away any way, shape, or form. And one of the things that scares me is that the American people are okay with that. They're okay with the government. They're okay with this administration printing money. And it's scary to me. It's very, very scary to me because the fact that we can just continue to print so much money and it's not a problem for the United States government to do it. But in a household, I have a 5-year-old daughter. I have a budget every week. If I go over my budget, do I just print more money? Do I just print more Bitcoins? No, I don't do that. I cannot do that. But the United States government thinks that they can do that. And it's a massive problem. And hopefully we can opt out with Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, that's the moral of the story here, right? You have one money where you haven't had any competition in the money supply for ever. And suddenly we have this decentralized alternative that the government can't shut down. It gives me a lot of hope to have that, because I mean, this came off the back of '08 crisis, right? That's when Satoshi Nakamoto starts diving into this, releases this white paper, because we saw all of the money printing that went on then. People were worried, and they were worried about why are we having the value of our money depreciated, devalued, just so that all these corporations can get all these bailouts. So this idea of having an alternative money that isn't controlled by some elite bureaucrats who are unelected in office is so important. So I completely agree, Wendy. Bitcoin and I think cryptocurrency is such a godsend, and I'm just so grateful now that people have alternatives, because I see a lot of heartache. I feel for you and your child and everyone out there who's trying to make ends meet, and I'm just grateful that now people at least have alternatives, because if they didn't, I think the situation would be a lot more dire for people. But on that note, let's dive into, I'm going to throw it straight back to you. Talk to me about, give me final thoughts on this, and also talk about where the market's going for crypto in general.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just got excited. So I just want to let everybody know, your government officials, they're real. I don't like the title government officials. I prefer the title public servants, because that's what they are. And that means they are supposed to serve you. They are supposed to represent your thoughts, your opinions, taxes, what you want done. That's what public servants are supposed to do. These people are not doing that. And I want to make it very clear that they are supposed to be servicing their communities, and they're not doing that. And as far as the crypto markets go, I'm actually looking at the chart right now. We're not looking good. And I think one of the reasons why we're not looking too terribly great at the moment is because of all of the news that's come out. I don't know what I can or can't say on this show. So I will treat it like my own. But basically, you've seen a lot of FUD that's going on, a lot of really scary things that are happening. I hope for world peace. I don't necessarily know if we're going to get that. But it's looking like we are breaking the EMA 9 on the daily chart at about $42,000. And if that does happen, I would kind of watch to about $41,000 to $39,000 over the weekend, unless we're able to get some majestic rebound to happen. I still do believe that we are in a bull market. I do not think that we are in a bear market. And number doesn't always just go up when it comes to Bitcoin. If you're in altcoin positions, I highly recommend you consider taking some profits if you're up in profit. And if you want to start scaling into altcoins, that's fine too, but use limit orders and don't just market buy. Make sure that you have an entry and an exit plan. A lot of people don't do that. You don't necessarily have to do that with Bitcoin if you're a long-term holder, but with altcoins, you definitely should.
Yeah, I'm bad at this advice, so I'm so glad we have Wendy here. I'm just looking long-term trajectory. I'm looking at the money printer. I'm seeing the inflation, and I'm saying, well, I definitely don't want my savings in cash right now. So looking to diversify your assets right now is not a bad play at all. And when it comes to short-term trading, definitely not my wheelhouse, but that seems like some pretty solid, definitely not financial advice, but definitely some interesting suggestions.
An idea
between friends from Wendy. So let's dive into the final topic for this block. We're talking about what's going on in the EU. So apparently Hungary is petitioning the EU to ban crypto. So the Hungary Central Bank has called on the EU to ban crypto mining, ban trading. They are looking to Russia and the proposed ban that was brought up a couple of weeks ago and saying, yeah, that seems like a pretty good idea. So you had, I'm not going to even try to pronounce this person's name, but part of the central bank there said, I perfectly agree with the proposal and also support the senior EU financial regulators' point that the EU should ban the mining method used to produce most new Bitcoin. That I don't even, what do they mean, like produce most new Bitcoin? Like it's always funny to me when you have officials talking about this, and it's like that didn't make any sense. But anyway, I'm going to throw this to you. What are your thoughts on the success of this and on the EU considering a ban on crypto?
This is the thing. The reason why we hear all of these headlines on these countries that want to ban Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is because number one, they don't understand it. Number two, they're scared of it. And number three, the banks know that they are losing. humans are not stupid, especially the underdogs. And I like to refer to the community, especially the crypto community, mostly as underdogs. And we were people have been suppressed for so long with the Federal Reserve and with these central banks all across the world. People are starting to wake up and they see that they do have an option, such as Bitcoin and, other cryptocurrencies, if that's what, people decide to do. So we're going to see a lot more of these stories. It's going to be FUD. It's going to cause, some market issues and whatnot. But at the end of the day, what you guys need to understand is these countries will eventually end up creating their own CBDC, their own digital currency. So they're going to have some form of crypto come into play. So I'm personally not worried about this. I don't know too much about Hungary's policies or how they treat their citizens there. But I do think that it will end up being okay. And I think it's just a bunch of FUD to kind of scare retail and to kind of just scare everybody in general. We see India that is invested in India bans Bitcoin and then it doesn't, and then it goes back and forth. So I think that they're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a lot of FUD. I think that I just don't see what leverage Hungary has for the entire EU. Like, I really want to ban this thing, and the EU is probably going to be like, nah. I mean, the issue with the difference between prohibition and banning, and just regulating something is prohibition never works. And we've shown that throughout history. And if the governments want to control this, it's much more efficient to just work it into the economy, and you can track it, and then you have everything KYC'd. And it's a terrible situation. But luckily, you don't have to use those rails in order to use crypto. You can use crypto in an agoristic fashion entirely outside of traditional financial infrastructure, which is pretty cool. But any final notes on all of this and the future of where we're headed with all of this kind of big news items?
Only thing I want to close out with is that if you're watching this show, reach out to your public servants and make some noise. It's very simple to do. You can go ahead and call them. You could go down to the office, whatever it is, but get off your behinds and do something good. And I think that that's going to be something that we need to do as a community. Don't dislike somebody because they like a different coin than you, or don't dislike somebody because they're a Bitcoin maximalist, or vice versa. We all need to work together in a collective way, showcase human decency to others, and work together to kind of fight this and spread the news.
And on that beautiful note, thank you so much, Wendy, for joining us. It's been such a joy. Always a joy to chat with you. First time I think that we chatted on my show, but I was on yours earlier today. Everyone should head to Wendy's show to check that out, and make sure that you follow her as well. She's awesome. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. I do may have a call out to someone from the chat. So we did get a member of NBTV during this show, which was pretty awesome and exciting. So Ungato just became a member of an NBTV fan, which was really cool. So thank you so much, Ungato. We really appreciate your support. If you guys want to say anything and add it to the show, let us know in the chat. We're watching the chat box pretty closely, and grateful for all of you guys for hanging out here. And don't forget to like and subscribe and all that. We're going to go on to our next block now, and I wanted to welcome to the show Lorne, who, as I mentioned earlier, he is the CEO of Breadcrumbs, which is an open blockchain analytics platform. Lorne, Lantz, welcome to the show.
Looking forward to
got sound. There we go. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Naomi. Great to be here.
So we're going to, yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to do this topic because this Bitfinex news came out, and there were all these reports showing we've tracked this money. It went in and out of dark markets. It went in and out of Monero. It's doing all these things, but we were able to uncover this couple who allegedly laundered billions of dollars. And I think a lot of people look at their crypto transactions in a very parochial way, and they're like, oh, well, I used a privacy coin at some point in those transitions. I'm safe. Or I used a VPN. I'm safe. And I think what this illuminated, it's a good learning moment for people. Crypto transactions are not as private as you think. So I want to dive into chain analytics, how it all works. First of all, just give me an overview of how you think this money was tracked in the first place.
Sure. This was over 6 years. The funds, when they came out of Bitfinex, they went directly into Alphabet. And everybody could see that. It's all public that the funds went into Alphabet. But, from an investigator point of view, the key thing that they're trying to answer is tying an identity to who's controlling those addresses. And so there are 3 major events that really help them connect an identity to the owner of those addresses. So the first one was, as I mentioned, like the funds went from the Bitfinex hack into Alphabet. So the first major event in 2017, they took down Alphabet. And law enforcement was able to get access to all this information about the 400,000 users in Alphabet. Email addresses, IP addresses, deposit, withdrawal histories. So, coming into Alphabet, the funds, law enforcement was clearly able to see where the funds went out of Alphabet. And so this is like all the additional private data that's available to the public. The second major event that happened was after the funds went out of Alphabet, they went into 10 different exchanges, and some other centralized services as well. So anytime the funds go into these exchanges, the person controlling the money has to use the exchange. They get their IP address tracked. They have to give an email address. And on some of the exchanges, they have to give, their passport photo, their names, phone numbers, address. This is all like very rich data to attach an identity to the owner of the funds. And so after that, by that point, like the law enforcement, the way they work is they'll go out and they'll subpoena the exchanges. So they'll send an email. They'll say, hey, can you give us all the information on this person or on this? And so, the exchanges will give them like all the information, passport photo, email addresses, IP addresses, everything, trading history. So it's very easy for law enforcement to see the funds go through that exchange. Now, the key problem or the key thing that Liechtenstein and Morgan did was on some of these exchanges, they actually gave their real identities. They gave their real home address. They gave their real passport photos. And so they could clearly see, now they have a suspect. They have, a bit of an idea of who might be holding those funds, which leads us to the third event. They managed to seize Liechtenstein's Google or cloud storage account. And in that storage account was, the best evidence of all, which was a file with 2,000 private keys on it. A lot of those private keys were the private keys to addresses of, that had moved the stolen funds. So, the old saying, it's not your keys, not your coins. But in this situation, it's if it is your keys, it probably is your coins, and that's probably the most damning evidence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what was fascinating to me, because I wanted to dive into the details of this, because I saw these transaction graphs that showed Bitcoin to Monero, to Alphabet to Bitcoin again. And it was really illuminating for me. I think a lot of people think that just because they're using a privacy coin, like, well, I'm using Monero, therefore I've cut off the transaction history. And so I've been like chatting to all these chain analytics people the last couple of days, including yourself, about this. I did not realize how chain analytics really worked. They're not following the UTXO history for a lot of this stuff. A lot of it is actually just circumstantial data. They're pulling it all together. They're doing parallel construction. They're looking at movement of money. Like if they see a similar amount of money move between different coins, they're tracking that. And machine learning is analyzing that and saying like, oh, they might be related. So you get these clusters and, you're joining these dots and you end up with a pretty comprehensive overview that's pretty startling with how you can join all these things together. So how advanced is the state of like machine learning and figuring out patterns like this right now?
Yeah, so there's quite a few different techniques just using public Bitcoin data. So the one most common technique, it's called blockchain heuristics. So in blockchain heuristics, you're basically analyzing the patterns and the flow of funds on the blockchain, using public data, not knowing the identity of the person. And so the most common one is called a common input heuristic. So for example, let's say there's 5 Bitcoin addresses in one transaction, and those 5 Bitcoin addresses are part of an input. So let's say I know the identity of Bitcoin address 1. The transaction was probably sent by one entity. Therefore, all 4 other Bitcoin addresses are controlled by the same entity. And just using that simple idea called common input heuristics, you can tie like millions of Bitcoin addresses just to one entity, if you know one of their addresses, which many entities out there, they self-disclose. Another one is geolocation. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Geolocation is an important one.
Yeah, so geolocation as well. So let's say a hacker does, thousands of transactions over a few months. You compile the time of day that those transactions took place, and you can kind of get a sense, well, the hacker's got to be away those transactions. So you can kind of get a sense of maybe what time zone they're in or what geolocation they're in. And then the third one, which some surveillance-minded analytics companies do. We don't do this because we're here for the public. So what they'll do is they'll set up Bitcoin nodes, and with the intention of hoping that people will connect to their nodes and broadcast their transactions through those nodes. And if they do that, well, guess what? Now they're able to get your IP address, the IP address of the people broadcasting out those nodes. So these are kind of like, they're called honeypotting techniques of trying to, do surveillance on people trying to do anonymous Bitcoin transactions. So these are some of the techniques that analytics companies use. And
there's a lot to dive into. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I just talked about public information, right? Then you bring in all the private information from all these centralized services.
Exactly. Some of the companies I chatted to, I was like, hey, let's dive into this. I want to know, like, Monero made an appearance there. Can you talk to me about your techniques for Monero? Every chain analytics company has actually, they haven't said we can't get any information. They've disclosed, they have said they will not disclose their proprietary information. And that makes me go like, do we have like this one-sided conversation going on where you have some people saying there's no data you can get? Absolutely. And the other people saying we're not going to disclose how we track these things. Because as a privacy person, I'm looking at my system and I make videos all the time about how we live in this leaky sieve digital world. There's no such thing as perfect privacy. You may think that you're being masked on this layer of the internet, but actually there are all these others that you've forgotten about. That's how really chain analytics works. So it's important. Like, I appreciate you coming on and explaining this stuff, because it's important people get a holistic view of how this works and kind of get like an understanding of the context. They're not looking at Monero in isolation. Monero is actually pretty robust, when it comes to the amount of data on chain. They've got stealth addresses and they've got bulletproofs, and you don't reuse stealth addresses. Like, they do some awesome things. I like the integration of Dandelion, which is optional if you're running a node. All of that stuff is great, but Monero does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in a world where they're watching all your internet activity. And I think that's a huge takeaway. But any final thoughts for people as they kind of think about their own privacy? Because just another like side note, I don't want to, like, in this situation, if these people laundered stolen funds, this was an example of chain analytics catching the bad guys, right? But the way I look at it is that these tools can also be used to track innocent people. And so I want to make sure that people understand when they're using these things, how much information is out there. So any final words that you have for people on this topic?
I think around that context, if you want to maintain your privacy, it's a bit of extra work, but as time goes on, there's more and more tools that make that work less strenuous, so something like a Samurai wallet or Wasabi wallet. And so I think a lot of it is, keep your OPSEC up to par, and just do your research, listen to shows like yours to learn how to keep your data private. And at all costs, if you're going to use any centralized services, realize that it's like there's a camera on you 24/7.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. But thank you so much, Lorne, for coming on the show. I'm really, really grateful for you being here, sharing your expertise. We're going to be doing a deeper dive interview, exploring chain analytics and how it all works. So keep an eye out for that on the channel. But thanks for joining us.
Great. Take care.
All right, so we're going to go into our final block. And before we do so, I just want to give a shout out. We got another member on the channel during that segment. So CJ Weston, Thank you so much. Welcome back. It's so wonderful. CJ has been around for years and years, one of the earliest supporters I remember from this channel. So it's so great to see people being here interested in learning about financial sovereignty, learning about taking back control of your data, all of those things. So CJ, I really appreciate you, and everyone who's here in the chat, and everyone who's smashing the like button, and everyone who's subscribed. You guys are really, truly awesome. So let's, on that note, dive into our final block, which is a doozy. Oh my gosh. Get off my digital lawn. Everyone, this is the segment where we dive into privacy in detail and give you some of the latest breaking news that you need to be aware of in this space. And I love the title, Get Off My Digital Lawn. Really encompasses what we're about here. So the first one, giant revelation. Newly declassified documents reveal that the CIA has been secretly conducting massive surveillance programs that capture Americans' private information. Wow, so that was breaking news. Basically, what happened was you had these two senators, Ron Wyden and Martin Heinrich, and they wrote this letter basically calling for more transparency about bulk surveillance conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency. Both of these senators are on the Senate Intelligence Committee. So just how you understand how these things work, they talk about like, oh, we've got oversight because we've got this select committee, and so we don't need to tell all of Congress about what's going on. We just have these committee members. So these two are privy to more information than most people. But it turns out that these committees themselves get lied to over and over again about the extent of all of these overreaching surveillance programs. So, and it turns out that Congress is lied to all the time. You may remember back prior to the Snowden revelations, Wyden, who's one of the senators involved in this, actually called out former NSA Director Keith Alexander and said, and also called out former Clapper, as head of like intelligence in general, James Clapper, who was director of intelligence, and called them both out. And they just lied blatantly to Congress. And it wasn't until the Snowden revelations that we could actually divulge that they were lied to. But Wyden tried his best to, whistleblow all of this stuff going on. But once again, he's, coming to the rescue to educate the population. Basically, there are all of these reports that got done. There was a report by the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board on a CIA bulk collection program that they'd instigated. And so these two senators wrote this letter saying, listen, we need to declassify this. We need to educate people about what the CIA is actually doing. Now, this letter is what got declassified. So we're learning that they are asking for this program to be divulged and all of this stuff. And this letter was declassified, which has some really interesting stuff here. It says that the CIA secretly conducted its own bulk program. It was authorized only under Executive Order 12333 rather than laws passed by Congress, which is how you would want most laws affecting all of us to be passed, actually have the people we vote in to have a say. No, this was executive order. And the CIA bulk surveillance has been carried out entirely outside of statutory framework and without any judicial, congressional, or even executive branch oversight. So there is literally no one looking over the CIA's shoulder to say, that's unconstitutional, that's clearly overreach. There's no one. They just have free reign. So this was really startling news that came out. The nature and the full extent has even been withheld from the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And so Wyden and Heinrich are pushing against this and saying, no, we need more information. It's created a giant stir. You've got Snowden tweeting about it. You've got, everyone tweeting about it, because essentially, like, the documents reveal this incredibly serious problem that is associated with warrantless backdoor searches of Americans. We have all of these amendments for a reason. We have the Fourth Amendment that says, well, you need a warrant to be targeted for a reason. So we don't have these blank surveillance rules. And meanwhile, we have the executive branch adding in all of these blanket surveillance allowances for places like the CIA. And we need to be looking into this very carefully. So Glenn Greenwald tweeted out, he says, There's pretty strong words here. He says the CIA is a criminal organization. Their interference in US politics is particularly pernicious. Maybe news outlets should stop hiring all of the people who run this agency to help analyze and report the news. Maybe journalists should be skeptical of their planted stories. Obviously, they're talking about this revolving door between these government agencies like the CIA and news outlets. So we know that Clapper has become an analyst. I think it's on CNN where he's reporting about stuff and telling you exactly how you should be thinking about these surveillance programs. Really not a good trajectory when the media is just a mouthpiece of the state. Snowden says the same thing. The CIA is not your friend. The CIA is not a friend of the United States. The CIA is a friend of power and power alone. He talks about his experience with the CIA in his memoirs, which I got on my bookshelf back there. You can see it over there. But I highly recommend you read it. The only other thing I will mention about this before I move on to the next crazy overreach surveillance program was a tweet storm from Liza Goitin. And she talks about what all of this means. And so this bulk collection, it basically means vacuuming up data indiscriminately rather than targeting individuals or groups, which is a huge issue. You know, mass surveillance is terrible. It is terrible and leads us down this dark Orwellian path where everything we've ever done, said on the internet, gets stored in this database in perpetuity attached to our identity. And regimes come and go, but that data is forever. That's the issue here. You may trust the government today, and you know that's fine, but societal norms change and regimes change. And down the track, that data is not going anywhere. That data is right there as a treasure trove of information in case you ever do anything that the next regime may not like and they can target you for it. So it's absolutely something we need to be fighting back against. So all kinds of things that she dives into. I'll post a link in the description of her Twitter thread, which basically goes into the legality of all of this. Meanwhile, you know, the CIA's official response to all of this is that they've been keeping, you know, the Congressional Intelligence Committee fully informed about this. But these two senators are saying, no, they're not. And I'm more inclined to believe Wyden and Heinrich on this one. And on that note, let's move on to our final topic, which is another surveillance doozy. What a week, guys. What a way to go into the weekend. So apparently, you may remember a couple of years ago on this channel, I made a video about this Earn It bill that came out. The Earn It bill was this terrible thing that people like Snowden, he tweeted out that this is a national disgrace. You had all these privacy, civil liberties organizations tweet out and say, we must stop this. There was huge pushback against this bill because it was insidious in how much overreach it would have into our lives. And I'll dive into the details in a second. But what happens? They just wait 2 years, all the hubbub dies down, and they just unanimously passed it on one of these boards. So it's like, wow, it doesn't even matter if people are against this stuff. They're just going to go ahead and pass this. So let's dive into what the Earn It bill is. Now, honestly, you can't ask for a more clear-cut example of why legislation like the Earn It Act, which undermines encryption, is a terrible idea. We just talked about the overreach of the CIA. We don't want everything we do to be unencrypted because it's just being hoovered up by organizations like the CIA. But let's dive into it. The new Earn It bill will effectively ban encryption. Make no mistake about it. So on the surface, they're saying that this will help children and it will, save people from sexual exploitation and all of these things that pull on people's heartstrings. And you say, "Ooh, I want to stop that." But let's dive into this a little deeper. So the Electronic Frontier Foundation said that the bill deals with the very serious issue of child exploitation online, but it offers no meaningful solutions. Rather, the bill's authors have shrewdly used defending children as the pretense for an attack on our free speech and security online. So what Earn It does is it basically gives the government an open-ended power to control content of apps and blogs and messaging platforms and every part of the internet. It would give them this open control to dictate how we use the internet and what is and isn't permissible on the internet. It's crazy how much power this would give them. So the real dark side of this is that none of these guidelines for what is permissible activity and what is not has actually been written yet. There are no guidelines yet. What this bill does is it gives this commission that will be set up a blank check to write whatever laws they want. And guess who's leading the commission? We've got people like Lindsey Graham, who literally has said that his number one priority is to ban end-to-end encryption, right? So a little bit of his history, if you go back to when the Earn It bill came out, about 2 months prior to the Earn It bill coming out, you had Lindsey Graham saying to Apple, saying to Facebook, you need to add backdoors into all of your messaging and to everything that goes on your platform, or you'll be in serious trouble. And then they refused, obviously, and Apple's still fighting them and Facebook's still fighting them. But meanwhile, 2 months later, he comes out with this bill that he's co-sponsored where he says, oh, in the name of children, we now get to dictate terms of the internet, which, and our terms may be that you can't include end-to-end encryption. So there's it's really crazy what's going on here. Every major freedom of speech and privacy advocacy group right now is calling this an abomination. So you see this article from EFF on there. They dive into it really, really in a thorough way. I highly recommend you read their article about what you can do as well in terms of reaching out to your representatives to get this thing stopped, because it is pretty scary. I have a video on it that I released 2 years ago, which dives into it, which is still completely relevant. It's still exactly what the bill is about. It's a scary situation. So I'm sorry to bring all this to you on a Friday. We want to be going into our weekend. We want to be having fun, but we also want to be mindful of the things around us so that we can make informed decisions with our lives, about the products that we use, about the people that we support. It's always better to be informed. So the bearer of bad news, but I'm happy to do it to make you guys educated about the privacy situation around the globe right now. So on that note, I'm going to bring this back to you guys and dive into some of the things that you've been saying. Every show we look at Twitter, we dive into some comments from different people. If you want your comments read on the show, make sure you tweet us. Keep an eye on our Twitter page. We are always asking questions before the show and trying to get your feedback and to get to read comments and things. So let's dive into the first one. What do we got there? All right. So we've got 2B News who says, how long might it take for the blockchain to replace most of what the government does? I don't know, but I am really looking forward to it. I would much rather have mathematics determining and safeguarding my data than the government's promises, because when it comes to government's promises, I just don't trust them anymore. It's just you have overreach after overreach, and it just gets to a stage where you go, I'd rather this stuff be determined by mathematics rather than bureaucrats. But that's a great question. We've got another comment actually from ACLU. So we pulled out this comment because we thought it was great, which pertains to the CIA release. So this surveillance is done without any court approval and with few, if any, safeguards imposed by Congress to protect our civil liberties. It is pretty scary, and Congress needs to act now. They need to end these programs. There's no oversight, and it's important that we as a population understand what these people in control are doing that affects us. As Wendy said, I liked her comment earlier in the show where she's saying that, this is that they're public servants. They're working for us, right? Let's not call them officials. Let's talk about them how they actually are. And I don't see them working for us right now. But the final one we got here, I think it's from EFF, so Electronic Frontier Foundation, awesome foundation for learning about digital privacy and security. So they said that the CIA's surveillance implicates the same fundamental constitutional rights as the NSA's mass surveillance programs. And let me just expand this because it's pretty... Sorry, I got my window really small. There we go. And we join Senators Wyden and Heinrich in calling on the CIA to release more details about the program. Absolutely. I hope that we all support this and just try to get more information about this. I want to know what's going on in my government, that all of my tax money is going to pay for. So that's the show, guys. That's it. That's the show. We come to you live every Friday at 4 p.m. and we have such fun doing it, and we bring you guests. If you ever have guests that you think would be fun on the show, make sure you hit us up on Twitter and let us know. And before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. YouTube doesn't show, it hides our videos from a lot of people. So this actually helps us in the algorithm and helps us get more visibility because you get notified when we do a video. On that note, everyone, go and have a lot of fun. I got some comments in the chat about what? Samson Mao's going to be the mayor of Bitcoin City? I'd like to see that. But we'll dive into that. And no, the phone isn't available. I've got Catherine asking about it. Lots of things that I'm exploring, potentially bringing out a privacy phone, but still exploring and interested in what Graphene is coming out with their new device. So I'll keep you all updated on that. But 4 p.m. Fridays, we'll see you back here next week, and we'll see you on our Twitter. Love you all. Have a great weekend. The spice like a friend. And get to choosing your weapon because the definite roar of indefinite war is epic. I found a new way to debit the people. I generate an address and I generate a sequel. Not yet. I think my mic's still live. Can they hear me rap? I'm a Bitcoin Baron. I'm scaring the status quo. Got that crypto going that far. The blow, got the algorithm. Go get them until prison. Since it's all prison. That's a dirty living. All right.